Well, I suppose part of this video is going over to Artist in Recovery / Darryl P. And to everybody else on the internet at this point, all day long we've been hearing about Trump directly and indirectly through media sources that Trump threatened Congress folk because of the fear and potentially legitimizing orders to the military to perform acts that they are uncomfortable doing. The military is supposed to be our defense mechanism under any and all circumstances, but there are limitations and legalizations that they cannot go past, otherwise they do face strict court-martial procedures. The Uniform Code of Military Justice is one of those things that does follow congressional law and laws in the books, but they also have rules and regulations of which they must abide. And if they will not, they get tried in court for it. And sometimes they lose big time. Trump has been acting out of character for a president. He's been threatening people's lives, freedoms, civil liberties. He's threatened to send the military beyond the National Guard into cities for law and order. We have rules and laws in the book. One of them is Posse Comitatus, which was generated out of the 1800s of preventing the military from becoming a police force. And there's certain autocratic groups out there and tyrannical regimes out there, they use military as the ultimate police force to push and subjugate the tyranny's will against the people until we get uprisings left and right, either by legal or by violence or by both. And in this country, we're hoping and praying that we do not do the violent because we want the courts to succeed, or also the elections if necessary, if they will be abided by. But if they're not, if it doesn't happen, my fear is we're going to be going into a violent revolution. History has proven that if there is no obedience to the law, to the rules, to the Constitution, to the courts are supposed to interpret laws according to what they view Constitution is supposed to be. They're not supposed to subjugate the entire nation under one form or another of tyranny. They're supposed to be upholding freedom. I'm going to turn on Jen Psaki right now.
Lawmakers traitors today for reminding active duty service members that they are obligated to refuse illegal orders. But it's worth remembering that this is not a radical concept. This is literally the law. And also, here's what Maryland Governor Westmore told me just last month.
Keep this on record.
We take the oath that we are going to follow the Constitution of the United States of America, and we will follow the lawful orders of the Commander-in-Chief. And that's the struggle that I think for a lot of members of the military, they're figuring right now, we will follow the commands of our Commander-in-Chief. That's the oath we took. When they're lawful.
When they're lawful. That's the key part. It's the same message. But Trump reacted differently this time. Maybe it's because his hand was forced in releasing the Epstein files. Maybe it's the recent wave of terrible polling headlines. Who knows? But what is clear, what has always been clear, is that his words have real consequences. And today the evidence came very quickly. One of the Democratic senators in the ad, Alyssa Slotkin, says she now has a Capitol police officer detailed to her 24/7. She said, quote, "We've had hundreds and hundreds, if not closer to 1,000 threats." That's just today. To Joining me now are two Democratic members of Congress who were in that ad, who have served themselves, who are urging service members to remember their oaths. Pennsylvania Congressman Chris Deluzio, who served 3 deployments as an active duty officer in the U.S. Navy, and New Hampshire Congresswoman Maggie Goodlander, who served as an intelligence officer in the U.S. Navy Reserve. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you.
Let me just start by asking you each how you are and if you have experienced what Senator Slotkin has experienced in terms of threats over the last 24 hours or less than 24 hours.
No one wants to have the president call for their death and hanging, which he's done to us and other of our colleagues, and that's a terrifying prospect. But I know, and I'm certain Maggie will say the same thing, we're not going to be deterred from doing our job and doing our duty, upholding the oath we both swore and our colleagues have all sworn to the Constitution. I'm not going to be intimidated by this president or anyone else, and I think it says something to the country that a president, the most powerful person on planet Earth, when confronted with members of Congress saying a basic fundamental truth about our Constitution, responds with a threat of death. That tells you who he is in his regard for the law.
It's quite telling. It really is. Have you had to get any new additional protections as a result of what Trump did this morning?
Look, it's impossible not to take steps when the President of the United States threatens you with violence, but the bottom line is we love this country, we love our Constitution, and what we've said is simply what the law is, and that is not a crime, that is not sedition, that is our job as lawmakers. And our message is to our service members who we deeply respect and who need to know that we've got their back. I think, Chris, you probably feel the same way. If I were in the Navy now, I would want to hear from members of Congress, I want to hear from the country that we are supported in upholding our oath to this Constitution.
Because members of the military, I think some of them are scared right now about what they're being asked to do and whether it's legal, right? I mean, that seems to be what prompted you to be a part of this.
And I think, look, we have the best and brightest, we have the best fighting force in the world, period. People understand their oaths, and senior leaders have the assistance of JAG's military lawyers to help them navigate through these questions. I have the utmost confidence in our service members, from the most junior to the most senior, that they understand the responsibilities. It's something we learned. Whether you were at boot camp or officer candidate school, you name it, you learn on day one that you are compelled to comply with lawful orders from the president on down, and you're never compelled to comply with illegal ones. That is a basic principle in our constitutional system.
I played a little bit of what Speaker Mike Johnson said earlier today. He got a second bite of the apple. I just want to play that, and we'll talk about it.
The words that the president chose are not the ones that I would use, okay? Obviously, I don't think that these are crimes punishable by death or any of that. Sometimes he uses heated rhetoric, okay? But do any of you agree that that's appropriate, that they should be telling young members of the military to defy orders? You should think about the implications of that. The president's trying to make a point. I think he made the point.
First of all, I don't know what point the president was trying to make. You were not telling anyone to defy legal orders, illegal orders. I've been around this town long enough to remember when supporting colleagues when there are security threats is a bipartisan thing, when supporting the military is a bipartisan thing. What do you make of that response?
Look, the speaker he's missing the point here. Our point is really straightforward and simple, and this is just not who we are as a country.
And look, I'll say it quite clearly. I heard from a lot of Republicans demanding that Democrats condemn the killing of Charlie Kirk, which we did. I was proud to say that when Donald Trump was nearly killed, we quickly condemned that violence in my home state of Pennsylvania. When Josh Shapiro was nearly killed in Governor's Mansion, you don't get to pick or choose when political violence shows up, whether you condemn it. I have not heard strong condemnations from my Republican counterparts. I hope they will do that. This shouldn't be difficult. The president called for our death and hanging because we said something basic and fundamental about our Constitution.
It should not be difficult, and I would condemn and call for, calm in any of those circumstances, and if anybody was threatened. Let's go back to the original meaning and reason for the PSA, or for the video that you all did. It was prompted, I know you've each talked about this in different ways in the media, it seemed to be prompted by concerns perhaps within the military, by some of what you have all seen as people who have served, that you have concerns about the legality of. This is one of the talking points from the right wing that I think is so insane, that there's no specific cases where there was any illegal actions. Tell me about what are you looking at that prompted you to want to be a part of this effort?
Look, we've got a president of the United States who has repeatedly tested the boundaries of the law, who has issued unlawful orders, illegal orders again and again. Just today, we saw a federal court responding to that. And we've got a Secretary of Defense who came before our committee, the House Armed Services Committee. I asked him a very simple question, a question that has only one answer. The question was, will you abide by a decision of the United States Supreme Court? He refused to commit to doing so. This puts our service members in a terrible situation, and it's on all of us to be very clear. This is a moment for moral clarity and for legal clarity. And what we have done is to state a simple and critical principle of law.
I think you're both providing a great deal of moral clarity. As I was just talking with Jonathan Karl about, neither of you are people who are out there looking for conflict or looking to make waves. You're there stating a principle and a value you believe in, which is incredibly powerful. I thank you both so much for being here. I know this has been a challenging day, and you're standing firmly despite that. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, coming up, we're going to take a quick break, but coming up, if you thought Lindsay Halligan had already won the award for Worst Trump Lawyer of the Week, think again. That's next.
Okay. So, let me see if I can try to put this into a perspective. Okay, guys? President of the United States that we currently have swore an oath on Inauguration Day, January 20th, 2025, to support, defend the Constitution, to obey the laws. If you want, I can pull up that information. Because I'm going to have to move the phone again. We'll move the camera for a different angle. So, I want to know... Presidential Oath of Office. Many sources, but I'm going over to constitution.congress.gov. Okay, Article 2, Section 1, Clause 8. Before he enter on the execution of his office, he shall take the following oath or affirmation. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. And for what they say is you're saying you're supporting the government. In any which way, shape, or form, you're supporting the government, because the Constitution is the backbone, the rib cage for our government. And with the manipulations of the justices and of Congress, with all the trumplicants in there, not to mention the executive branch being overwhelmed by his clones, the Constitution is becoming moot and null and voided. He is forcing us to go into either a branch where he's going to be controlling everything, or his party is going to be doing that, or else we're going to be running into a civil war over this. We're already trying the peaceful approach, blowing whistles, chanting like crazy, showing signs at the law enforcement officers, or if they call themselves that. Do they truly support the Constitution? I don't think so. I don't think so. I haven't seen what the court orders are, but I'm going to have it on record here. I'm waiting for the commercial to come off, so I'll turn it back on MS now. I had forgotten that they already had changed formats from MSNBC into MS Now, which is a totally different entity altogether than dealing with the NBC organization.
A lot of ways to
Commercial
advertise your
break.
business.
I just want to know my ads are working.
Why not see for yourself? Spectrum Reach has a 24/7 reporting dashboard that's loaded with performance details and measurement data for full transparency.
Okay, that tells me people are seeing the ads, but how do I know I'm getting results?
Spectrum Reach uses deterministic multi-screen attribution.
That lets you know when someone who's seen your ad has done something about it.
Right, like go to your website.
Nice. How can I learn more?
Go to spectrumreach.com.
Last night we talked about Trump's new federal prosecutor for the Eastern District of Virginia, Lindsay Halligan, and how she may have bungled the indictment against James Comey so badly that the case may ultimately be dismissed. Now today we got a story that feels like the news gods heard that story and said, hold my beer. I mean, do you remember just about a month ago we got the news that the politicized mortgage fraud investigation into Democratic California Senator Adam Schiff had stalled? After months of investigating, the top federal prosecutor in charge of the case told the DOJ that there was not enough evidence to indict. But that news didn't sound right to conservative activist, realtor, and California congressional candidate Christine Bish. There's a lot packed in there. I mean, Bish claimed that the news couldn't be true.
All right.
She said that she was the author of the report that initiated the Justice Department's investigation. She said that she was the key witness and that the case couldn't possibly be over because she had been summoned to Maryland, where the case was being investigated for questioning. And it turns out the very last part of that was true. Today, Bish really was interviewed by a prosecutor in Maryland, but while she thought they were going to be asking her about Adam Schiff, they didn't. As Bish put it to CBS News today, they weren't asking her about Schiff. They were asking her about other people who were investigating Schiff. Well, that just got very awkward. Sources familiar with the matter tell ABC News that the FBI realized something fishy was going on when they first went to interview Bish. Quote, when FBI agents first made contact with her, Bish expressed confusion about why federal investigators sought to speak with her again, telling agents that she had repeatedly spoken with a man she believed worked for the Department of Justice. Now, as it turns out, that person Bish had been talking to did not work for the Department of Justice, but he does appear to have been working on Trump's behalf. Now, there's a lot of details here. To understand what is going on here, we have to just zoom out just for a second. If the investigation into Adam Schiff for mortgage fraud sounds familiar to you, it may be because that is what so many of Trump's perceived enemies have been investigated for. New York Attorney General Letitia James, former FBI Director James Comey, Fed Board Governor Lisa Cook, Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell, all of them. The Justice Department has investigated all of them for mortgage fraud. All of them claim there's no merit to those investigations. But at the core of those investigations are these two men you can see on your screen, Ed Martin and Bill Pulte. Now, Bill Pulte is the director of the normally somewhat boring Federal Housing Finance Agency. While that agency traditionally focuses on our nation's mortgage industry at a macroeconomic scale to prevent, say, another 2008-style housing market collapse, Pulte has instead focused a lot of his time on investigating the mortgages of individuals, and specifically individuals who are perceived enemies of Trump's. There's that. Then there's Ed Martin. Now, you likely remember him as the guy who donned a Columbo-style trench coat, you can see him there, and posed for a photographer from the New York Post outside of New York Attorney General and perceived Trump enemy Letitia James's apartment, while he was investigating her for alleged mortgage fraud. There you go, in his costume. Trump appointed Martin to lead his so-called weaponization working group at the Justice Department. Then Pam Bondi made Martin a, quote, special attorney for mortgage fraud. But now today, MS Now reports that a federal grand jury in Maryland is investigating them. Oh, how the tables have turned. I mean, specifically, a federal grand jury in Maryland is investigating whether Bill Pulte and Ed Martin illegally shared sensitive grand jury information with unauthorized people, and whether the investigations that Pulte and Martin were doing were tainted by the investigative methods the two used. Not only could that be used by defense attorneys in the investigations into Adam Schiff and Letitia James to get the cases dismissed, but if the grand jury in Maryland decides to indict Bill Pulte and Ed Martin, they could be looking at criminal charges themselves. Charges like obstruction of justice and contempt of court. Now, when asked about today's news, the Justice Department had no comment. MS Now has also reached out to Bill Pulte for comment, but has yet to hear back. But now that I've kind of zoomed out a little and explained all that context, let's just zoom back in again. Because sources familiar with the matter tell ABC News that someone had been questioning California conservative activist Christine Bish about Adam Schiff's mortgage and claiming they were with the Justice Department. But they weren't actually FBI agents or prosecutors involved in the case. It wasn't Ed Martin, it wasn't Bill Pulte, but that person's question started the investigation that may now have them both in hot water. So who was it? Well, MS Now's Ken Delaney has been breaking news on this story all day, and he's going to join me and explain it all next.
Well, I'd rather be talking about how Trump can get away with telling people that he wants congressfolk who produced a video concerning about the worries of Trump's orders to the military. It's always been said, as far as I've been reading and studying history, and not to mention hearing stories and other things, that we always have the soldiers, the foot soldiers. I was just following orders. I'm innocent. Right, you're the asshole who shot people left and right because you were under orders from a higher purpose, and therefore you're exempt because you were following orders. You couldn't be judged for it, right? But unfortunately, that is so wrong. Because they can be judged. They can be prosecuted. We've had trials indicating that all the time. Judgment in Nuremberg was one of those times. Even though the orders came down from one lunatic with a short mustache and had a burp his ass, but the steps down below kept following those damn orders until you had the foot soldiers. And even they got prosecuted and grilled. Took them years, but they're judging and finding everybody who did war crimes. Massive humanitarian injustices. That in the background would be my dog fussing and fumbling again. Give me 1 second. She who must be obeyed and is the tyrant of the home. Gaze upon her. And the noisemaker. Let's do another bed.